I want to talk about the necessity of movement today from the lessons of Lot. Now, it would be very easy, as you guys know, for me to just focus on Lot's wife, because that's the story here. But I want to really look at the essence of everything that was going on. The first point that I would like to make clear for us today when it comes to movement is this: that the movement that was good for yesterday is not necessarily the movement for today. I'm going to say that again because I've used this phrase. One of my mentors used this phrase, and he says the obedience for yesterday might not be the obedience for today. But I want you guys to understand this, that the movement that was good for yesterday is not necessarily the movement for today. Let's talk about how Lot ended up at Sodom. Because, did you ever think about that? See, I think about those things. How did Lot end up there in the first place? How did he end up in this place that was set to be destroyed because of the sinful nature due to the moral decay that was existing in this city? How did he get there? Well, if we go back to Genesis chapter 13, we understand the story of Abraham and Lot. Abraham and Lot were family members. Lot was Abraham's nephew, the father, right? The father, the multitude of many nations. And Lot was his nephew, and they were living side by side, and their families and their wealth began to grow. Their possessions began to grow. They was doing well for themselves, okay? They were doing really, really well, such to the point that Abraham and Lot were like, hey, we need to do something here. Like if we continue to grow like this, we're gonna start having some infighting. As a matter of fact, their employees started fighting with one another. Said, "Look, we're doing so well. We gotta kind of separate so that things will go better." And so Abraham, being who he was, said, "Hey, Lot, choose whichever direction you're gonna go in. You go that way, and I'll take the other side." Right? And so when they were at that place that they were about to separate, we see it in Genesis chapter 13, verses 10 through 12. It says that after Abraham gave Lot the choice, that Lot looked around and he saw that the whole plain of the Jordan toward Zoar was well watered, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt. And this was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. That's important. Verse 11. So Lot chose for himself the whole plain of Jordan and set out towards the east. The two men, Abraham and Lot, they parted company. Abram lived in the land of Canaan, while Lot lived among the cities of the plain and pitched his tents near Sodom. How did Lot end up in Sodom? Well, everything started fine. Everything started okay. Because when things were going well, they said, hey, how do we keep things going well? Lot looked and he said, hey, that plain looks good. I mean, it reminds me of home. It reminds me from where we came. This is good. It looks like Egypt, where we came from. And it looks like home. It looks like a place I could settle. It looks like the gardens of the Lord, he said, is well watered. I could do some stuff in that space. So Lot began to move towards that plain, which was in Jordan, which happened to be on the way to Sodom. The plain was like the garden of the Lord, he said. The land was good where he went. The first movement to the plains of Jordan, it was good where he went. When he went where he went, it was the right decision. But I'll say the main point again. The movement that was right for yesterday is not necessarily the movement that is right for today. We've got to learn to go and shift with the seasons. Because now, if we fast forward to what we read where these guys were warning Lot, telling him, you better get to stepping. If we go there, we see that now the seasons change. Because now where they were, right in these plains next to Sodom, if they stayed where they were, if they did not move, it was going to end really, really bad. The land that was good to them in the past was no longer the land that is good for them in the present. You need to learn to identify what is your land. Is your land a relationship that was good for you in the past and is no longer good for you in the present? Is your land a job that was good for you in the past no longer good for you in the present? Is your land a habit, an activity that you do that might have been good for a season, but is no good for you now? The movements that were good for us in the past are not necessarily the movements that are good for us today. I remember in 2005, before the whole the first real estate housing bubble burst back in that time, my wife and I, we were living in a 2-bedroom condo, and we were expanding our family. We already had 2 children and one on the way, and we were considering a move. We wanted to move, and we looked at a house, and we thought it was the greatest house ever. And so we said, all right, you pray and I pray. And we were in church that day on a Sunday, and she was worshiping in one side, and I was worshiping on another side because we were serving in church that day. And at the end of the service, we got together, and we're like, God spoke to me. She's like, yeah, God spoke to me too. I said, what did he say to you? She's like, what did he say to you? I'm like, it's one of those, And she says to me, God said we need to buy the house. I'm like, that's the same thing he said, let's do it. So we bought the house. It was probably more than what we should have bought at the time, but we knew that if God said to do it, we needed to do it. How many of you guys understand that when God tells you to do something, whether you think it's the right move or not, you just better listen. You just got to do it. You just got to move in faith and make the step of faith. And so we bought that house in 2005. It was one of the nicest houses in the neighborhood, and we loved it, and it was great, and it was all done up, and it was gorgeous. It was beautiful, okay? But what had happened was 2 years, 3 years later, market shifts. I'm in the real estate business, and all of a sudden, we can't afford the water. We can't afford the lights. We can't afford anything in the house anymore. We can't afford the mortgage and foreclosure. So we start questioning ourselves. Lord, we know you told us to buy this. What's going on? Well, the movement that was right for yesterday wasn't the movement that was needed for today. See, we learned after a time that season where we couldn't pay for what we know God told us to take on was a season of learning for us. It was a season of obedience and a season of faith. During that time, we had been tempted many times to be disobedient in our tithes and our offerings, or to be disobedient in our service. We were tempted in that because we could have worked extra and served less. We could have given less than our tithes and our offerings and had more in the bank, possibly, to pay the bills. But we did not fail in that temptation. So could you imagine, we were faithful in our service, we were faithful in our tithes, faithful in our offerings, faithful in what we were doing, we were obedient in the buying of the house. So you could imagine that there might be a place of confusion somewhere in that space. Are you hearing me? Have you ever done everything right and then wonder, why is this still not looking the way I thought it was supposed to be looking? Like, what's going on here? Like, I'm doing what I know, something's wrong. Well, it for us was a time of testing. We were never disobedient in that season. And although we made the right movement, the right decision at the time, the next right movement was to surrender the house. You understand? Because we had learned the lesson that season of the house was supposed to teach us. See, that house wasn't supposed to be with us forever, but the lesson that we learned through the situation of the house was. And God understood that if we had not gotten the house, we would have not gotten the lesson from the house, that the house was temporary, but that the lesson was permanent. Do you hear what I'm saying? Like sometimes we get so caught to things of the past that we forget that thing in the past, that was a temporary thing. But the lesson from that season, from that movement, is eternal. And so we moved on because the movement of yesterday was not necessarily the movement for today. Are you hearing me? Some of us need to let go of some things we're holding on to in the past. What worked for you yesterday may not be any longer right for you today. The second point that I want to make here is that we need to be careful to make the right moves, in the right direction, so that you need, therefore, to mind your movement. You need to place mind to your movement. In our case, with the story of the house, we knew it was the right decision because God had spoken to us clearly, independently, verified by different sources, not just our emotions, but different doors that opened up for us. So we knew it was the right move, okay? When Lot went to the plain of Zoar, he knew it was the right move. It was the better choice. It was the land that he needed to take on. But how many of you guys understand that the first movement needs to be followed up by a series of right movements as well? You can't just make one right movement and expect, they're all going to be right from here on out. It doesn't work that way. You gotta, if you choose, hey, this is the wife for me, that might have been the right movement, but now you got to make all the right movements thereafter. Are you understand what I'm saying? We got to learn to make the right. You said, this is the job for me. Well, now you got to make the right movement to show up on time and get the job done right. You got to make the right move subsequent to the first right move. So we always got to be walking in the right direction. Now, I would be remiss not to talk about Lot's wife using this story. What happened in verse 17 when they grabbed him by the hand, they took him out, and they said, hey, flee for your lives, like run, get out of here. What did they say? Don't look back. Like go, get to moving. Don't look back. And what did Lot's wife do? Go like this. Come on, do it. Do it. Well, we're going to talk about obedience next week. Come on, just look back. What did Lot's wife do? She probably did it with attitude too. She looked, right? Why did she look back? Why did she look back? She was told not to look back. She knew that place was about to blow up. There's a couple of reasons why I think she looked back. But I think the emphasis from the angels when they said, don't look back, run for your lives, don't stop anywhere in the plane, get to where you got to go, make the right movement. They were emphasizing the seriousness of the movement. They were emphasizing to them the seriousness of the need to move. Sometimes we don't take serious the need to move. And we're like, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it now. No, you need to move today. Because if you don't move today, something's about to blow up in your present.